Welcome to Story Church Online. We are so excited that you've joined us today. And it's not just any regular day, it's Valentine's Day.
Yes, it is.
Yep. And for this day of love, Pastor D and I decided we'd join these guys and love it up as we continue with our series. It's CrAzY
Until it isn't. So we've been in this series all of last month and this month, and we've talked about a number of things that are in fact crazy, well, until they're not. And so we started about talking about what it looks like to start with God and just really having prayer at the heart of it. We've heard an incredible message on what it really was to be the church. We heard a message on what it was to surrender and just so many different things. And all of those you can find on our YouTube channel just by searching Story Church, capital S, capital C, no space. They're all there for you. And we're continuing in that series today.
And today's CrAzY, we're excited to share with you together, is maybe some principles around healthy marriages, healthy relationships, and we're calling that the 4C's of healthy marriage, healthy relationships. And those 4C's are Christ, communication, compromise, and commitment. And we can't wait to share some of that with you.
Yeah, but before we get started, we have something we want you guys to take a look at. So sit back, enjoy, and we will be right back.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. And that video is proof that relationships can last for a lifetime. But there's principles to a lasting relationship. And I think the one that really just sticks with me from that video so much is never use your partner's vulnerabilities against them. Wow, what an impressive list of principles. And we hope to share some things that are going to help your relationships and marriage last the test of time today as well.
Now, marriage is obviously the highest expression of love between two human beings. But we really believe that these principles, these 4 C's that we're going to communicate today, that they really transcend even the borders of just marriage. So whatever relationship that you find yourself in, we are 100% certain that these 4 C's, when applied, can transform that relationship for the better.
And so that brings us to our first C, Christ. You say, what does Christ have to do with a healthy, long-lasting relationship? Well, we feel like He has everything to do with a lasting, healthy relationship. And so consider this, the foundation is the most important thing in the design or building of any structure or anything. The foundation will determine the shape that the building can be. It also determines how long it will last. It determines how it can endure even adverse conditions. Think fire, earthquakes. All of that starts at the foundation. And then there's even codes, like wherever you may be watching this, if you're in a building, it is to a code.
Yeah.
There's a law that the foundation needs to be a certain way. And we're just presenting to you this idea that with Christ, we want the foundation. You can have good values, but do you know why?
Yeah.
And He is the foundation for those incredible values.
How much does basing your relationship or marriage on a foundation of Jesus really make a difference?
Well, makes a huge difference. And I mean, you know, a Christ-centered marriage is all about serving one another. And it's not about me first. It's about how can I serve you first, and what does that look like? And it's about humility. And I think humility, you know, we have to keep that in mind when we take a look at the cross and what Jesus did on the cross for us. And that to me is just like the best example in the world of what serving one another looks like and what humility truly is, you know. And it's asking that question that we say a lot, what does love require of us in this moment? And so I think going back to Jesus' example, that's exactly what He did. He showed us what love required, and that was giving of Himself sacrificially. And that's what Christ, you know, being at the center of our marriage is really all about. It's serving one another in humility.
And when we do that, it really changes things. And you might be out there saying, I agree, but do I need Christ as my foundation? And we want to be clear, you can serve each other and not necessarily have Christ as your foundation, and you'll benefit from it. But here's the thing is when the storm is hitting, right? When the storm is really beating against the house of your life and your relationship.
Because it will. It's inevitable. And your relationship will experience storms.
They come like, you know, there's a hurricane.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a hurricane season. There's a storm season. There volcanoes even ever so many hundred years, erupt. Earthquakes happen when you're in certain areas. And those things, they happen. So here's the thing. If we're just having to muster up the principle of serving, but we don't have a source. And so the thing I love what you said is just that humility, Christ models a humility. And in some studies that I had done with some Story U stuff a while back, I come across a sentence that blew me away. Before Jesus, humility was mocked and made fun of. And now 2,000 years later, we expect all of our leaders, great athletes, to have a little bit of it, or we're just not sure. It was Jesus that brought that value into the world and made it something that relationships thrive on. And so having the source in our relationship allows us to draw on that, not just when the going's good, but when the going gets tough.
Yeah, that's really good. And it goes back to, like, in our marriage, asking the question, are we truly connected to that source, to Jesus? Because He's the one that teaches us how to love, that teaches us how to forgive, and how to, to be all that we need to be to our spouse and to our partners in our marriage. And so He's our source. Jesus is our source.
Absolutely.
And really, until we establish that, these other principles, they don't have near the impact if we don't establish that first.
Right.
And so for the past few months, you may remember that our first application point for a number of Sundays was to start with God. Why? Because, like you said, it's the source, it's the reference point, it's the anchor in the storm. Like it's essential. It's the foundation for our relationship. Yeah.
Well, you look at all the key values of a successful relationship. You got love, serving one another, humility. These are all things that make a relationship really successful. Forgiveness. I mean, if you don't know how to forgive well, you're not going to have a lasting. Now, you might have 10 years of no one like really screwing up, don't think it's possible, but you could, right? Until that one day.
One person in the relationship could be like on an extended business trip.
Right. Really long.
So then it would apply. Yeah. It's
Right,
like 10
right.
years, you haven't messed anything up.
But
It's because you wasn't here.
But imagine extended seasons where there isn't a significant enough failure to really have to apply. I mean, hypothetically imagine. At some point, if you got two human beings, you're going to wrong each other in some way that if you don't have that foundation that taught forgiveness and a why of forgiveness, it'll be really hard to practice it when you need it most to get through that storm and to survive. And so all the key values are actually, they're not just taught by Jesus, they're put on display. And then he claims to say, I'm the source of power to where I'll change your heart and I'll make you actually good at these values. So that's why I think the foundation's really, really
that's
important.
really good. And just the final thought here, talking about Christ as our foundation, and that's where we want to start is, if your relationship is based in God's grace, you will avoid putting expectations on your partner. And it's something that only God can feel. So if I'm expecting Royce, or if you're expecting Chris to fulfill a certain desire and expectation that we might have of them, God is wanting us to flip the script on that today and put that on him and allow him to fill those desires and those expectations and those needs that ultimately that we all long for, on a deep, deep level. And so
we set our partners up for failure when we expect of them what only God can provide. So if I make her ultimate in my life, I've already set her up for failure. So I could deeply resent her for not being God to me when God never asked her to be God. But I need to get that from God. So then when my foundation's right, that's right.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note too is that we can't start with God until we or I start with God.
that's good.
It's like I have to do, because if I don't understand how I've been loved by the Father, I can't love correctly.
That's right.
If, like you said, if I don't remember the grace God extended to me, it's going to be very hard for me to extend grace in the relationship.
Right.
If my identity is not secure, then I can be Jekyll and Hyde in this relationship. So I have to be in relationship. I have to have time for me to establish me in the context of starting with God, as does she. And then when we're both doing that, when we're all doing that, then I think we really get the fruit of what it is to start with God.
That's fantastic. Jesus actually tells us that the key to forgiveness is just simply in that moment when it's needed, someone else needs it, remember how much you've been forgiven.
Yeah.
If that's not your foundation, then you don't have that place to get to forgiveness. So whenever D would need forgiveness, and just for everyone, I'm always the one that needs it. But if she needs it,
There was that one time.
there was that one time in 25 years. But how do I get to the place? And so I have to remember how much God, just like you said, how much God has done. That foundation activates this horizontal realm because the vertical is in right place. And that leads to every other C from then on.
that's right. Speaking of,
Our second C, chicken. What is our
Country.
Chick-fil-A? Yeah.
Country buffet.
Communication.
Communication. Clearly we didn't communicate because we all had a different C in mind, didn't we?
It could be because we're so hungry.
That could be it. That could be it.
Communication is huge in marriage. I feel like we did good by putting Christ first and then communication, because nothing's as big as starting your marriage with Christ and having that foundation. But communication, that's right there, tail behind it.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, and we all know that the breakdown in most relationships is the lack of communication, the poor communication. And so let's ask this: how has communication impacted your marriage, and what advice would you guys give other people that are in relationship about communication, and how important
communicate about our communication.
how important is it in a relationship?
It's so important. If you can't communicate with one another openly and honestly, then you are going to be in a never-ending cycle. Things aren't going to be resolved. I can't expect him to understand my needs if I don't communicate those. I feel like communication, no one's a mind reader. Communication, it allows us to meet one another's needs. It allows us to live on the same page. And instead of just having these ongoing assumptions of how we feel where the marriage is and how if you have an issue in your marriage with finances, if you have an issue, marriage, relationship, finances, sex, kids, those are all different issues, but they all stem back to one thing.
Yeah, communication. And I think it's really important too. It's like communication isn't natural for any of us.
No.
You know, it's like I have a way
practice.
that I know communication works for me because I've seen this modeled. It's like, this is the communication environment I was brought up in. She has a communication environment that she was brought up in. And so if we're not willing to do what you said earlier, Dee, when you said that question, what does love require of me? Like, that's a great way to even look at communication. It's like, what does love require of me? Sometimes it means that I have to change the way that I give information and the way that I hear information because it's how she communicates.
Right.
And so one of the greatest exercises that we've done is to learn how each other communicate. Her style is completely different than mine. I'm words of affirmation. Jen says, I'm proud of you. And then I say, proud of what? I want specifics. I want her to use words to do that. Jen likes to take time to think about those words. So if I put her on the spot, then she's just kind of quiet. And so we've really had to learn what it is over the years to when to communicate. I think it's not just that we're communicating, but when and how is equally as important as what we're doing in the communicating itself. And so that's been really huge. And I think that...
And there's so many resources available to do that.
Yeah.
To learn. I feel like there's no excuse to overlook that and to not put the work into that because it's just going to be a constant frustration. And like you said, it even comes down to, I hear things differently, you speak them differently, but it comes down to the timing of conversations too. Certain times for me are not approachable, but they are
7
fine
p.m.
for
on.
you. Between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. I'm golden. 4 after that, I just need to take a nap.
Now that's really good because I mean we all speak differently, we communicate differently, but we also hear differently. And so the different lenses, and we've talked about that before. You're speaking red, he's speaking blue, but it's somewhere in the middle, it's looking purple here, and so you have to, the filters, you have to try to work through those.
The resources are there, and I think if we value the right foundation, you get that right. I mean, just if you look at the building, right, they spend so much time getting the dirt level and then getting the concrete right. The next thing would be, I'm committed to establishing healthy communication because that's the next great piece in building something well. I think a lot of times we overestimate our ability to communicate. And it was like you said, I know how I communicate and I'm pretty good at mine, but that's English, right? Or it's German. And my wife speaks French or Italian. And so you have to learn the language of the other or it becomes a very selfish, non-Christ-like way of trying to communicate.
Because it's all about me. It becomes all about
you
me.
need to learn my language.
And I'm not honoring you. I'm not giving you that grace or that margin to grow in your own uniqueness because I want a carbon copy. And I think that's a big thing with communication is understanding that it doesn't mean sameness.
Right.
It's like you're going to have a unique way. I'm going to have a unique way. But what can't happen is one or both of the individuals in the relationship to say, well, I'm just not wired that way.
Yeah.
No, because what that's saying is I quit. It's
That's
I quit on learning you. I quit on trying to grow closer to you. And in the heat of battle, when those storms are there and we're just going at it, right, in an argument, that's not the time to learn to communicate.
No.
That's usually when our communication does more damage. That it becomes the storm, right?
We
It's
need to be
like
ready for the storm before the storm.
the time to learn when to communicate is in the calm. It's in the still. And we should constantly be committed to growing in our relationships and learning more about ourselves, more about each other, so that we can become better communicators. And a big part of becoming a better communicator, which you guys are doing very well right now, is being great listeners. You know, and I think of the passage in James, it's like slow to speak.
Yeah.
And it's quick to listen, you know, and then it's also slow to anger. It's like when I'm really have Christ at the center, it's not about me. So I'm going to defer to really hear what's on your heart, to hear what's on your heart, to hear how you feel. And then I'm going to process it in a way to where I'm not going to become a victim. I'm not going to look to lash out or keep score or to hurt you or harm you. But how can I grow so that we can grow?
Yeah.
And
I like what you said about our communication styles and each of us not being, it's not sameness. Even though God created marriage relationships for two people to unify and be one in Him, oneness does not equal sameness.
yeah,
And just recognizing that you have to put the work in to
That's really good.
discover your differences. Celebrate your differences.
Yeah.
You're unique. You were created that way, but you're also together for a reason, and celebrate your differences, but find what complements each other.
Well, healthy relationships, I mean, it's a word we use or hear a lot, but we kind of lose the meaning of it. I think every healthy relationship is really about university, not uniformity.
That's good.
University is oneness from diversity. And so that takes willingness and work, but you still have a distinction, but you're willing to align it with another's distinction, keeping distinction, but then together becoming something more than you would be by yourself. University. I think that's a beautiful word that we need more of in this world too.
That's good. And
Good.
no, I was going to say, and another word that's beautiful.
Keep building the house.
Yeah,
This is the next most important thing.
We're building on
Praise,
the foundation.
communication,
Yeah.
and
Compromise. Compromise. And on the surface, a lot of times when we hear that word, we think of it in a negative way, but often as a form of weakness, you know, that compromise can be weakness, but that's not just true most of the time. Most of the time.
No, sometimes it's true, not all the time.
In a relationship of true love and trust, Royce doesn't have to be right all the time. No, I don't have to be right all the time, but sometimes winning in a relationship can feel like losing, you know, when your definition of winning is all that you can think about. You know, I need to win. And so that's the beauty of compromise. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And so typically they say, like, right, the studies show that 70% of the things that we argue about, or 70% of the conflict that we have, like, there's no resolution. It's like we're fighting over stuff that has no resolve.
There's no right or wrong. Yeah.
So what role then does compromise, like, what does it play in really allowing us to experience a healthy relationship?
Two things jump up to me that I'll just throw out there and see what you think. But
We'll compromise on that.
we'll compromise on that. And I think we have to fundamentally shift the definition of compromise to something that is not weak. It's strong. And actually, if we think compromise is some form of weakness, it's because we have a hyper individualized definition of winning. So winning is just Royce, right? And so then she's other, and if it's not aligned with Royce, then I have existential dread, I'm insecure, I'm afraid, I'm worried, I'm going to be less of a man. And then you can't compromise because it's like actually wrecking my identity. Yeah. But if I get a fresh definition of winning, and I shift the definition of winning from me to us, me winning is not the same as us winning. And Christ calls us to us winning more than just me winning. And so I just encourage everybody, we have to shift our definitions to what makes us succeed rather than just me succeed.
Yeah, and and compromise is not always, you hear it say, well, compromise means let's meet in the middle somewhere. And it's not always that. Sometimes compromise is going more than halfway. Sometimes it's me
For that
coming your
moment.
way for
Yeah,
that moment,
yeah.
or sometimes it might be you coming my way, and it's not just in the middle. It might be 70, what is that, 70-30? Is that 100?
70, 19, I think.
Yeah, 70-30.
I'm from Texas.
Or, it might be 50-50 on one day, but sometimes I feel like that we feel like compromise automatically thinks, oh, well, we're just going to meet in the middle here, and you have to come this to this line, and I'm going to come to this line, and that's where we're going to meet. Sometimes it might be not just always, directly in the middle. And at the same time, though, compromise doesn't mean that I have to give up my independence, and who God made me to be, or my freedom to come your way. You know what I mean? And so,
and the power of that is, do you willingly choose to do it instead of me trying to coerce you or threaten you into it? That's the difference. I think a lot of times we're so close to the right answer and what needs to happen in a relationship, but we feel that someone's making us. And that is an unhealthy. You don't need to do it just because you need to find that place. And I go back to that foundation. When you look at the cross and good teaching, good counsel, you could then be willing to take a step a little bit past 50-50 for a time. Because if you take like a pendulum, there's energy sometimes in a relationship, and that energy will need to work itself out as it swings back into a healthier balance as we become whole. But if one's not willing to ever, if we're always that tit for tat, then we're always going to be in a territorial place that just, sometimes I have to give more. It's the right thing to do. And sometimes you have to. But that energy in commitment and in conversation and communication will begin to work itself out as we love that way.
And you mentioned it when you talked about the cross. Like, what really was the cross? Was that a compromise? Like, you talk about an unfair compromise. That was 100% death.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give
loss.
100% of me. I'm going to give my entire life. And why am I going to do it? I'm doing it to totally remove everything off the table so that you can experience love. So if have Christ as the foundation, then sometimes compromise, it's not a lose-lose, or you're only giving 50, I'm giving 50. It's like, I love you so much, and I'm going to honor you that I'm willing to go all the way over there just to learn something different, to be in university, to be engaged in that way. And so compromise, when motivated and driven by love, like, it really communicates commitment.
And Jesus teaches us that that's the secret to the human heart, is gestures of self-sacrificial love that's willing. I choose to do it. That's the key to every one of us. When we see that someone loves us like that and will go that far, then it activates something in my heart. And then I'm
it's empathy. It's
Yeah.
entering into the other person's world long enough to try to really understand maybe where they're coming from, even in the heat of the argument, and you're just like, okay, if I can stop long enough, let's go back to the table here and let's figure out, there's always a third option. Like, we feel like in the moment it's just my way or it's just your way, and you're not winning today, so it just makes it worse. And so realizing that God gave us a third option, and that is the way of love. And again, it goes back to that question. In the moment, we're trying to compromise here. What is love asking of me to do right now in this moment? It could be asking me to compromise.
Yeah, the garden, 2 trees, but one tree is 2 things. Good knowledge of good and bad. And we can get stuck in that binary polarity when the third option is coming back to life. Is loving like Christ, loving like God. I'll just leave you with this and we'll move to our last C. 1 Corinthians 13:4 in the Message just says it like this: love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut, doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others, isn't always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep score of the sins of others, doesn't revel when others grovel, takes pleasure in the flowering of truth, puts up with anything, trusts God always, always looks for the best, never looks back, but keeps going to the end. And compromise is a big part of loving well and loving like God.
Yeah.
That's so good. And it brings us to our last C. So when you start with Christ at the foundation, and then you learn the art of communication, and you understand honor and love enough to be willing to compromise, then it leads us to this last C, which is commitment.
Beautiful.
Yep.
So the story of God consistently describes God's people as a people of covenant. I mean, that is something that if you're connected to God, you are in a covenant. And you also establish covenants with other people. So from you guys' perspective in your marriage and your relationships, how important is a real, fresh, modern understanding of covenant in a relationship? And what things could you share with the rest of us from your lives about the power of a deep, sustained commitment in your relationship?
Well, conflict. It is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. I just truly don't believe people when they say that they have never had a fight.
Yeah.
That's because they're not compromising.
Yeah.
Somebody's just rolling over.
Yeah.
It could be, yeah. Someone's just shutting down, very likely. Yeah.
Or they don't really know each other very well.
Yeah. Two separate worlds. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's what
I
I mean.
agree
Like
with
they're
that.
married, but like they're in two separate worlds. They hardly spend any time together because their schedules are so different. Like
People evolve, right? It's like I'm not the same person today as I was when I was 31, you know, and I'm learning more about me and she's at a different place. Our kids at a different place. And so as we constantly evolve, our communication and our relationship should evolve forward in a healthy way as well. But to get there, it's like there's going to be conflict. Like you were saying, it is inevitable. We can't avoid that. So when I really think of commitment, like what's the thing that makes me say I'm 100% committed? And the thing that makes me feel that way is like when I feel safe to do so. And I've done it. I've brought my ugly, my mistakes, my failures, my brokenness to Jen. And I put it all out there because I felt safe enough to talk about it. And the way that she responded in love and grace because of the first C, Christ is the foundation, her response to that, to me, it made me feel safe. And when I feel safe, it's like, okay, hey, you've seen my worst. You know I'm not perfect. You're not expecting me to be perfect, but yet you still love me. Yet you still wake up, you roll over and you look at me. You still want to kiss me. You still want to kiss me when I haven't even brushed my teeth yet. It's like I feel safe. And I think that there's a big part of our commitment that really comes to life when both individuals feel safe being themselves, being able to communicate their thoughts, being able to share their dreams or even their hangups with each other without fear that you're going to abandon me, without fear that you're going to leave me, without any fear, because fear is not the motivator we want. Perfect love casts out all that fear. And when we're both,
she's not going to use your vulnerabilities against you. Like the quote said at
the
the
quote
beginning.
from the video.
and when I've showed her, when she's seen my worst and she commits to staying and vice versa, it's like, then we see the commitment. It's like, okay, well, if you know that and you're still here, it's like, we can get through anything, but we need those storms. So it's the gift none of us want, but we need them to be able to see what we have in each other.
We grow from those.
Yeah.
And I think 3 important phrases kind of goes back to communication that you have to implement in your marriage to be able to create that safe space to have healthy conflict and to go through conflict in a safe and healthy way is, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and please forgive me.
Yeah.
Because if you can't say those things, then you can't expect that kind of grace back when the tables are turned.
Yeah.
that's really good.
And commitment keeps us together because sometimes we get better at it, but sometimes those words come slow. And again, we're not saying, stay indefinitely in abusive, awful situations, but commitment is saying, I'm here while it dawns on you, and maybe even dawns on me, right? We're imperfect people working through and really, truly a great relationship's inspiring each other to grow. Yeah. I'm serious. I've said this my entire life. This woman is the greatest catalyst for my spiritual evolution and my spiritual maturity on this earth. And I believe that's what a healthy relationship at its best can do, is inspire us to grow. And the other thing I was going to say, that you were talking about the storms or things that tend to break down, commitment is like the fasteners that keep each of these layers connected to the foundation, which the foundation is going nowhere. But a commitment means that each part of this building needs to eventually somehow be fastened and connected to that solid rock. That's not going anywhere.
No, that's so good. And at the heart of it all, it's like that's exactly what we want. And that's what we need to be able to go forward. It's to have that person, that companion that believes in you. And like you said, it really is when I feel safe, then I'm inspired to explore. I'm inspired to want to grow. Like I'm inspired to want to be better for you because of the environment that you're creating for me to grow in. And I just think it's so crucial because there's a lot of relationships that you talk to covenant that they're the opposite of a covenant. They're a contract. And it's like, well, I'm not getting what I want. It's like, I can't do this. I can't do that. And when we make it all about ourselves, it's a contract. And when it's a contract, then there is no commitment. It's not deep because I haven't established the other thing. So then I withhold, I withdraw, I retreat without giving you any information. And so it's very easy for me to dismiss the commitment or our union together just because I'm not getting what I think I deserve. Yeah. That's a contract.
Right.
And that's a me first type reality.
Yeah. And it's you're never going to experience a healthy, life-giving, God-given relationship as long as you're filtering it through self. So it kind of takes us back to that first C, the foundation, because it's not only the foundation, it's the filter by which we see these other C's.
Yeah, and when you love one another, you are willing to do whatever it takes. And sometimes, and we all come from different families of origin. We're all raised different. We all have a different definition of what we think commitment looks like and doesn't look like and all those different things. But at the end of the day, I think giving ourselves permission to feel, I think, is huge in marriages. And that can really impact, for instance, here's an example, even in our marriage, is giving myself permission to speak up and say, and this is kind of covering all the C's here, is just communicating how I feel to you about a given situation and then giving myself permission to be okay with feeling that way. Because I feel like that a lot of times we don't communicate or say exactly how we feel, maybe because of fear or these different things, that we might deal with. But in our marriage, what I was going to say is I've given myself permission to take a time out. And because like Chris said earlier, we go through different seasons in our marriage because we're not the same person that we were 26 years ago in May when we got married. I'm definitely not the same person. But giving myself permission that, I might need a break once every 3 months and just go on a 1 or 2 night getaway so that I can just clear my mind. And that's just one example. He needs his mountain time with just him and God. And I want him to go to the mountains with just him and God. We need that in our marriage. And so I think it's important to in your marriage to figure out the things that work for your marriage specifically. And I just wanted to throw that out.
Well, and but it's communicating too what you need. It's like, hey, I'm communicating, I need space. And so I'm going to take some space because if I just withhold communication, well, then it's punishment. It's not a tool that's bringing us together. It's a tool that I'm using to punish you. So I'm just not talking to you. I'm going away for the weekend and you're just going to have to pick up the pieces as they fall. That's not a committed level of communication. So it's like, hey, I need some time right now. Hey, I'm going to take the weekend. Hey, I'm going to do this. But I'm communicating to you and you respect and love me enough to know okay, hey, I know that you obviously need it if you're communicating it.
And connecting that to a higher definition of winning, just going back to the foundation, is that when I grow and evolve, I do need mountain time. Mountains saved my marriage. No, that's funny. We market that.
I would tell him, isn't it time for you to be going to the mountains?
If I haven't.
She has his boots. He hasn't even walked in the house yet. Here's your boots. Yeah. Here's your backpack.
She's supportive.
All the essentials.
But when Christ is the foundation and we are growing in our followership, I need mountains. I need outdoor time. It fundamentally helps me. But I don't have to look at that as just what I need. I begin to see that as a positive thing. I'm not trying to twist it selfishly. I'm saying that can make me a better version of who I need to be for us. And so that's part of tying whatever it is you might need to the definition of us and what helps us win. So your definitions have to shift from what makes me win to really the bigger win is like 11 people on a football field, right? It takes all of us working together for us to win.
That's so good. And we just want to thank you just for allowing us to have a conversation around 4 things that have definitely impacted and helped our relationship. And kind of as we close this whole thing out, I know we've shared, 4 different C's, but let's go ahead and really distill this down into just simple application points. So anybody watching at any time, do these 4 things. What would be the first thing that you would say?
This week, and we want to give you application for each of these 4 C's. So this week, are you ready? Drum roll. Start with God.
Yes.
That's putting God as a foundation. Whatever you're going to do, start with God.
Commit to growth. Do the work that it takes to discovering your differences in communication and discovering how each of you speak to one another, how you hear things, and what your needs are individually in those areas, so that you're going to see a huge difference in your relationship if you just slowly start speaking each other's language.
That's so true, so true.
And getting over the need to be right. Compromise, honor, loving one another.
Yes.
Him before me before
You
him.
before me.
No, I'm just joking.
We'll
but
fight
yeah,
over that.
Yeah.
Me before me.
Yeah.
If more of our fights were over that, things would go.
Trying to outdo one another in honor, right?
Outdo one another.
Asking what does love require of
Yes.
me. Yeah. Compromise.
And then that last one, commitment. Choose to stay.
Yes.
Create a safe environment. Grow together.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Thank you guys for joining us today, and we will see you next week. If there is snow while you're watching this, enjoy it with your family. We love you guys. Have a happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's. And stay tuned for stories.
Yes.
We want you to sign up, get plugged in, and get
Stories.
connected into a story. They're on the
Yes.
way.
Story.
Happy chocolates and flowers.
So Valentine's Day is coming up. What are you getting your wife?
Nothing.
I don't think it works that way. Nothing?
Nothing.
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 Diabolical.
Yep, this year for Valentine's Day, I'm the present.
Oh, can I please be here when you tell her that?
Look, as if our wedding vows weren't enough. Through the years, I power washed the deck, I YouTubed how to build a walk-in closet, I even changed the toilet paper roll. Sometimes without even being asked. I took her to Graceland twice.
But Graceland isn't a two-trip kind of place.
And do you know where she has her weekly women's Bible study every Monday night?
Do I want to know?
Right over there, in front of my 70-inch crystal clear True Tone LED, while I sit in the back room watching Monday Night Football on my kid's cracked iPad.
You saint.
So, this year, no presents, just presents.
What'd you just say?
I'm not getting her any presents. I'm giving her presents.
So let me get this straight. For Valentine's Day, you're not getting her any presents with a T. You're giving her your presents with a C.
That's what I said. Presents, not presents.
Diabolical.
Hey, honey.
Yeah?
As you can imagine, Valentine's Day did not go well for Jerry this year. Don't be a Jerry. Make those you love feel special.